I believe Islam Makhachev is going to try to become a double champion in 2024, and I think that's going to be the only double champ attempt of that year. Now, what makes me say this? I was actually doing research for another video for this channel over who is going to lose their belt next year and who is going to maintain it. And when I got to lightweight, I had to ask myself, it's not that, do I think Islam is going to lose the belt? As much as I like Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, and Arman Tsarukyan, I just don't believe they would beat Islam Makhachev. As much as people will say I'm a Dagestani hater, I cannot deny just how good Islam Makhachev is. In my mind, he is already better than Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, I will say this. I believe Khabib is one of the most overrated fighters in MMA history, purely because people do believe that he is the best MMA fighter of all time. That's just crazy. I'm sorry. I just can't agree with that. But that's a different rant. I believe Islam Makhachev is a much more well-rounded fighter than Khabib is. Khabib's a better grappler, don't get me wrong, but well-rounded, Islam Makhachev, he's had tougher matchups already in his career than Khabib ever did. But back to, do I believe he'll still be champion? If he wanted to maintain the lightweight belt, I believe he could. But let's think of it like this. Khabib was never about title defenses. I know there was extenuating circumstances. I know his dad died. I know his mom told him to retire. But even he'll say, the original plan was 30-0. We were only one fight off. At best, we would have had 4 title defenses. That's not a wild amount of title defenses if we're looking at the Anderson Silvas and the John Jones. And I understand his reasonings for that. But Islam Makhachev doesn't have those. If Islam wanted to continue fighting, he could, but I don't believe he's going to at lightweight. This is my prediction. I'm not going to beat around the bush anymore. This is what I think is going to happen. I think Islam Makhachev, at best, is going to defend the belt against against Justin Gaethje. I think Justin Gaethje is going to be the next guy to fight for the title. Islam doesn't want a rematch with Charles Oliveira, and I understand his reasoning because the biggest gripe we had with Kamaru Usman is a lot of his title defenses were just rematches. He rematched Jorge Masvidal. He rematched Colby Covington. I get it. Leon Edwards was a rematch. So I understand his reasoning there, so people can't delegitimize his title reign then. People are already doing it now. You beat a featherweight in Charles Oliveira. The featherweight he fought was the #1 best fighter in the entire UFC. If you want to talk shit about the second fight, I understand why, and I will still bring up that gripe he fought on 10 days' notice. He fought Alexander Volkanovski in Perth, Australia. I have to give you credit for that. So, I don't understand that reasoning for delegitimizing his title reign. Now, does he deserve to go up to welterweight after maybe beating Justin Gaethje, the only title defense that I think he'll get in next year? No. Let me make something perfectly clear. He doesn't deserve it, but Islam Makhachev going up to challenge Leon Edwards solves 2 problems for the UFC and puts the UFC in the dream scenario. And let me explain to you why. One of the problems that the UFC is dealing with at welterweight that this solves is the Bilal Muhammad problem. I want Bilal to fight for the title, and frankly, Bilal Muhammad needs to fight for the title next because we need to figure out this roadblock because you can't justify giving it to anybody else until Bilal fights. However, I don't think people are really going to go up in arms if Islam Makhachev decides to have a super fight with Leon Edwards next year. You could justify putting that over Bilal Muhammad. Rip Bilal, I know. But it does solve this problem. And in the process, you could do Bilal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, #1 contenders match. Winner gets to fight the champion. Or if Bilal turns it down, you could just give it to Shavkat anyways. But another problem this solves at the same exact time is Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor, whether he comes back on UFC 300 or not, is coming back next year. He's going to be fighting Michael Chandler. Now, when I say those names, a lot of you are going to say, it's like, yeah, he's fighting Michael Chandler. That's a money fight, but that doesn't put him in title picture, right? Let me ask you a question. Why do you think Michael Chandler is still ranked? Michael Chandler is ranked at number 5 in the most competitive division in the entire UFC. And he's coming off a loss. Who's a loss to a guy who is coming off a loss. So why does he get to keep his rank? Nobody says anything about that. Because the UFC wants so badly for Conor McGregor to beat Michael Chandler, a top 5 lightweight. So, on paper, you can throw him into a championship fight. I know that's crazy. I don't agree with it. But on paper, it makes sense. You can do it. The biggest problem, though, is let's be real here. Conor McGregor has around a 50% chance of beating Michael Chandler because Michael Chandler has some of the worst fight IQ in MMA history. I actually call it the Chandler syndrome because you have a game plan to win a fight, but you do the exact opposite because of a fight of the night bonus. Even though you're already rich. But Conor McGregor has a 50% chance at beating Michael Chandler purely because stylistic. He is not beating Islam. Islam Makhachev, I think, would be able to outstrike Conor throughout 5 rounds. I think Conor maybe wins round 1 if Islam doesn't immediately take him down. Outside of that, he gets destroyed in every aspect of the game. And the UFC, they would make money on a Conor versus Islam fight. Don't think they wouldn't. And Islam's asked for a Conor McGregor fight. However, what you can do, Islam Makhachev fights Leon Edwards. You can either force Islam Makhachev to fight on short notice. I know that's crazy, but remember, they did that to Aljamain Sterling. They forced the champion to fight on 2 months' notice. That's not sounding too crazy until you realize bro was at 175 pounds cutting weight. Remember, they wanted Sean Strickland to fight on short notice. This was one of the guys that they called to fight Khamzat Chimaev on the Abu Dhabi card after 1 month from Sean Strickland beating Israel Adesanya. They wanted the champion of the division to fight somebody who's making their ranked debut in the division in Khamzat Chimaev. If that's not Dana White privilege and they were just trying to sneak something in there hoping it would land, understand, if they could justify doing that, they could justify making Islam Makhachev maybe fight 1 month earlier than he normally would, maybe make the weight cut a little bit more difficult, just to point the odds in Conor McGregor. Understand, the UFC does not rig fights. They do not. If you want to see evidence of that, Conor McGregor lost to Dustin Poirier 2 times. If the UFC could rig a fight, they would rig those. But they will undoubtedly stack the odds in a favorable fighter's side. O'Malley knew he was going to be fighting for the title next. Aljamain Sterling didn't know he was fighting in Boston when he fought Cejudo. He did not know that. O'Malley did. He's the challenger. Why does he get to know that? Dricus. They knew Adesanya was going to fight in Australia. Adesanya knew in May he was fighting in Australia. I believe it was in September. He already knew. They thought it was going to be Robert Whittaker. That's why it was in Australia to begin with. I'm bringing up these examples purely to tell you that the UFC will tilt the odds in somebody's favor. And if they're going to do it for Adesanya, if they're going to do it for Khamzat, they will do it for Conor. But I don't even think they would need to. Because Conor McGregor, after beating Michael Chandler, and if Islam doesn't want to make the turnaround, which he doesn't have to, you could do an interim belt to keep that division moving. You can justify that so easily. And that fight could be Justin Gaethje as he's fighting Max Holloway for the BMF belt. We have one other pay-per-view seller, Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira versus Conor McGregor for the interim belt in 2024. Like, that sells itself. There's not even a lot of marketing I have to put into that. If you want to go extra crazy with it, you make that fight in Brazil. Dude, like, that is a remake of the Jose Aldo fight. That's the symmetry. And then after that fight, And understand, I don't believe Conor would beat a Charles Oliveira. How... He doesn't have to. Then that's already one of the craziest moments in MMA, if he's even able to get into a situation where he can win a belt again. But if he wins an interim, understand that you're going to see the biggest event in recent MMA, probably the biggest pay-per-view numbers ever since Khabib Nurmagomedov fighting Conor McGregor, honestly. Because now we have a Conor McGregor with the interim fighting a returning Islam Makhachev who just got done winning the welterweight belt, going down the lightweight to unify them. I don't think I need to tell you why that's a win-win scenario. And if Bilal Muhammad loses the Safkat, that's a win-win-win scenario. I think that's what the UFC has been slowly moving towards ever since Conor McGregor's comeback is now being pushed over to 2024. Because we can start moving stuff around. If we have an idea of when he's returning, the year, we know how things are going to be placed. Charles Oliveira fighting Conor McGregor for the interim belt would be crazy for the UFC. Islam Makhachev fighting Leon Edwards, crazy for the UFC. But what would be crazier than both of those super fights is if you did a unification bout. Conor McGregor interim, Islam Makhachev returning champion after winning the welterweight belt. Like, I don't think he wins. Let me be perfectly clear here. If Conor McGregor by some miracle can beat Charles, Conor McGregor's not gonna beat Islam, but you could convince the fans that he's going to. That sells itself. I think it does. If you enjoy this video, please consider a like, comment, share. You know the drill. Really helps me in the algorithm. Adios, guys.